Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So in today's lesson, I want to go through moving averages, and I want to give you a real clear idea of how I use the moving averages in each time frame to help me define the trend. So let's go ahead and get into this agenda. So I like to use an 18 and a 40 MA. This can clearly, what I'm going to show you, can be done with a 20 and a 40. I don't like it as much with the 20 and 50. I know a lot of people like to use the 50 MA. That's fine. I'm just telling you, for my approach, I think the 40 works a little bit better when I'm using the 18 and the 40 or the 20 and the 40 together as a buddy system. The slope of those lines are really important to me. So what I want to do in this, go through this agenda here, which is essentially I want to define what an uptrend is, and that'll tell you what a downtrend is as well. I'll go through that. And then I also define what isn't a trend or what is in transition. So once you understand this and then you can put it into multiple time frames, I think it gives you a huge edge. And then after that, we'll go through these symbol requests that came through. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson now. Okay, so I've got 4 charts of Microsoft up with a monthly bottom left, weekly in the bottom right, a daily in the upper right, and an hourly in the upper left. And what I've talked about in numerous lessons is that we're trying to identify each time frame's trend. Okay, we're not going to go through momentum today, but we also want to look at the momentum of each time frame as well. And this can give you a huge advantage. But I'm just going to use Microsoft as my example today, just because it's showing essentially four different trends in 4 different time frames. All right, we've got a monthly chart that is in transition. And how do I know that? So if the 18 is rising above the 40, then we know we're in an uptrend. If price is above the 40 at least, and both of these lines are rising, and the 18 is above the 40, then I'm defining this as an uptrend. It's pretty simple. During uptrends, what am I looking to do? I'm looking to buy pullbacks in the area of the 18. All right, when we get those opportunities. If you notice what happened from 2020, it never really pulled back at all towards the 18 after that. And so, you want to be aware of that once you start to getting really stretched away. But as long as these 2 lines are rising and price is above at least the 40, then we know we can define this as an uptrend. Well, look at what's happened now. We've got this moving average. The moment this moving average starts to flatten out, we know we're in transition. Now, obviously, we have dropped a decent amount. It's just like anything else that's an indicator. We're always going to have some lag to it. Price is always going to give us the first indication if we're watching price first. And that's why I do a lot of videos and a lot of lessons on price and price structure. But this can really help us define what's going on as we go through a list of stocks quickly. I can see that this is rolled over. Yeah, this is still rising, but I don't have a trend in place because these lines aren't rising, right? Or they're not falling. If they're falling, then I have a downtrend. If price is below the 40, and 18 is below the 40, and they're both falling, then we know we're in a downtrend, okay? So right now, this is in transition. It's not an uptrend. It's not a downtrend. And I've seen stocks stay in transition for extended periods of time, especially on the monthly chart, where you could spend a decent amount of time channeling sideways. So we just want to be aware that that's where we're situated in this time frame. So, if you can define these, I think it can really help you. If we go to the weekly chart, I would refer to this as an emerging uptrend that was a downtrend. If we notice, the 18 was below the 40, price was below the 40 for the majority of this, and both lines were declining. So through this period up until right about early 2023, this was in a downtrend for most of 22. Right? It rolled over, right in the first quarter of first month or two of 22, and that point it was in transition, and then it reversed to a downtrend here, stayed in a downtrend through this whole period. I mean, I think this is a pretty big advantage if you understand what this is helping you with. It's really helping you define and simplify the trend structure and really define what's going on in terms of whether there's a trend or not. If we go back in time, you can see this was in a really strong uptrend with the 18 above the 40. Each pullback here was an opportunity on this time frame, even though we weren't getting pullbacks on the monthly chart. We had a monthly chart in an uptrend, and then the weekly chart was providing all these little opportunities on pullbacks to a rising 18 above a rising 40. So if you can use it that way, I think, again, it can be a really big advantage. Now, we know this is an early emerging because the 18 is above the 40, but they just started rising here recently, and we actually haven't had a test of the 18 yet. Right? We don't have a real confirmed uptrend at this point where we've tested it and gone to another new high, but we have successfully tested the 18. This is no small matter, right? We want to be on the watch for the first time we successfully test that 18, even though that happens before these lines cross and before lines are both rising. We have some confirmation that this is an emerging uptrend. This is pretty strong action what's going on. In fact, the worst part of what's taking place in Microsoft right now, to me, is that we've got a decent amount of distance here and we've got a decent amount of distance here, and this line is obviously still declining. This is still in transition, and this line is declining, and this is getting extended. So there's a little bit of risk in the short term, especially as we approach this prior high. Now, if we look at the daily chart, we're actually in an uptrend. We've got a rising 18 above a rising 40. We had a deep pullback in April, but it did emerge out of that and keep the trend intact, and potentially could see another pullback trade. The only thing I'll say is that if I'm looking at Microsoft, I probably wouldn't want to play a pullback here because it's extended on this time frame and it's kind of extended on this time frame. Not exactly something I'd want to play unless I'm doing it really quick off of really small time frames. But I just thought it was worthwhile to sort of explain that, yeah, this is uptrend, this is early emerging, this is a transitional phase, and then this hourly chart is a no trend. I mean, there's nothing here. Look, the 18 and the 40 are both flat. When you know you have no trend is when you don't have really any respect, especially for the 18 MA, where you just keep crossing above and below the moving averages and you're just kind of waving back and forth, and there's just no activity whatsoever taking place here that is in terms of respecting that line, or higher highs and higher lows, or lower highs and lower lows. So if you don't have that taking place, you know you have no trend. If you can start defining these trends in different time frames, let's just show you another example. Look at Tesla. Tesla is an interesting example because now, look, this is below the 40. This line is declining. Now, both lines aren't declining on the monthly chart. We can't call this a bearish trend. Like, this is not a long-term downtrend. It is a transition pattern because it was up for a very long time. Now, if you go and look at this chart, why do you think my service on this green bar right here, why would I have highlighted it right there? Right? This was an early emerging uptrend on the monthly chart. You see that? This is a test of the moving averages when they're rising for the first time, coming out of a massive base, right? So we want to be on the lookout for early emerging trends, especially on these bigger time frames. Right now, we've got a transitional phase taking place on the monthly chart. We're in transition on the weekly chart. We're in a downtrend essentially on the daily chart. But this is important. If we get a little bit of a rally here, this line's going to cup around very quickly on the daily, and this will be no longer a downtrend. It'll be in transition as well. So transition, not far away from being transition potentially. And this is a tough one. I mean, if you do it by letter of the law, it's a downtrend. But see how these lines are so close together? You don't really have the look of a strong downtrend, but this is more negative than it is positive right now. Now, one of the things I'll point out is once you start learning multiple time frames, which is in my book and in my course, you'll notice that this pullback here is something that you'd want to be attracted to, because we have an uptrend on one time frame, and then on the lower time frame, we had a transitional phase that did not turn into a downtrend. Okay, listen to what I'm saying here. A transitional phase that did not turn bearish. When we know that happens, as soon as this starts to emerge to the upside, we want to play that and get on board the trend on this time frame. All right. So once you start to understand the multiple time frames, I think you can use these different phases, whether it be transition, early emerging, uptrend, downtrend, or no trend, to your advantage. All right. Let's go ahead and get into the individual symbols. If you like the content, please hit that like button and also subscribe so you can get notified on any new content coming. So I wanted to point out that I am doing a live event coming up May 31st from 4 to 5 Eastern Time, which is a Wednesday. You can find out the details at www.rabelstockresearch.com/webinar. I'm going to go through the market. It's really for my subscribers, but I'm opening the event for anyone. It is a free event. I'm going to go through market, go through some ideas, cover some questions from subscribers, and hopefully it should be pretty informative, I think. So if you have an interest, you can go to rabelstockresearch.com/webinar and go ahead and register for the event. Okay, lots of symbol requests came through, so I want to make sure I get to as many as I can. So I do want to start with the spider very briefly. And, just to follow up, we've got a transitional phase here in the spider. We're in an uptrend just barely on the weekly without a lot of momentum, right? But this is what's interesting. This flipped to a transitional phase, but notice how this is forming a really mild pullback, almost like a zero line reversal with low ADX. And now we're trying to emerge out of a very, very tight pattern. If we go to the hourly, you see how the hourly was a no trend setup, sideways action. In a lot of cases, your no trend is setting up a low ADX condition. So you always want to check out when we have no trend in price, you want to see, number one, is it kind of a tight pattern, which I like, and then also, do you have a low ADX condition in place? So we're trying to emerge out of this pattern. Do you see how the last breakout was way overbought when it tried to break out? You see this, the difference here? And we had a big spike low here. This is like a climax, but we don't have any kind of a low ADX condition that could lead to a really nice breakout. This is a much better setup than this was here, this emerging here. So we'll just have to see. We still got a gap level. We still got the 4,200 level in the S&P coming up. So, but I do like the looks of this better. Now, one of the things I'll mention here is when we break out like that after moving up for 3 or 4 bars, I usually like to look for a pause or something like this, or a lot of times you get a higher pivot low or some kind of a hook or something like that. In this case, it's just kind of walking sideways, but it's staying above the breakout level, which I like. And if Green DI can pivot up back in here with a rising ADX, we could get some follow through out of this. So I don't want to see this fail now, right? I mean, if we can't get through here and we just turn back down and fail miserably, getting back down through these moving averages, then it's another false breakout, kind of like what we had here. So we do want a little bit more confirmation, but I do like what I'm seeing so far, and I like the kind of the way this is set up. So we'll just have to see if we can get any kind of a follow through from this. All right, let's start getting through some of these symbols. So first question I had was the daily chart of this uranium energy UEC is breaking the downtrend line. Right. So I do agree. We've got a 1 in place, and now we're forming the 2. Right. We've done the 1. We've done the 2. But you do need to look up and see what we're dealing with. So so this is in transition or very close to being in transition based on the moving averages, right? If this can flatten out, then we go to transition from a downtrend. We have divergence taking place based on the MACD, but we've got a pretty strong ADX condition. The other thing that bothers me is the weekly's in a downtrend, right? And we've got very strong ADX in place. So if we're in a downtrend and we have strong ADX confirmation, then I'm sort of assuming that there's resistance around the 18. Now, it might not be right at it, but somewhere around 3.25 or something like that. And we have price resistance here, but somewhere, I think, is if we do rally, if we do turn this up, and in order to do that, this is now in a downtrend, we're going to have to turn this back up and turn this into an uptrend. And if we can pull that off, then we could maybe look for a move up towards the weekly line. I don't know that I would be expecting a move to tear through these moving averages and tear through the 18-month, which is rolled over, and work back up to this prior high. So I like the concept of what you're thinking. I think there is a bounce coming, but I think you might have to temper your expectations a little bit. Okay, GDX. So here's the key here. We've got a uptrend developing on the weekly chart. We're pulling back for the first time. All right. We know we had some resistance here, so we wanted to see what kind of a pullback we would get, and we've got this. Now, we're in transition on the daily chart. Can this go from transition back to uptrend without turning into a downtrend? So if this turns down and we get a move to the downside, we're going to have drastic overrun here. We're going to have selling here. We're not going to be able to play this because this is going to end up breaking the 18 and it's going to turn neutral. So we have to see how this reacts, and if this can stabilize here without really breaking this moving average and without turning this into a bearish trend. So we're at a really critical point here. If this is going to make it, it's probably needs to start stabilizing pretty soon. Okay, wheat is different. I mean, wheat is just a bearish trend. Look at, so this is transitional, but we're coming down to some pretty good support in this zone, and we've made a pretty big decline, but we're a bearish trend here. We're a bearish trend here. All right, and we're actually just flipping into a bearish trend on the hourly. All these trends, the shorter term trends, weekly, daily, hourly, all down. We're going to need to see a change from what we're seeing. The momentum is confirming right now, so it's way too early. Unless you want to play some kind of a counter trend reversion trade or something like that, it's way too early to be thinking about this. We don't have any signs of divergence or anything like that. Okay, UNG. So UNG is a little different because this moved up here at 10 and then went to a new low, and we have some divergence developing on the weekly MACD. Way overdone to the downside. We're still in a downtrend, but again, we've got some signs that momentum is slowing a little bit. We're starting to see transition. What I like about this, and one thing you should point out, is we go to a new low, we go to another new low. We're still in a downtrend based on the moving averages, but if you notice, we're showing divergence here, and the ADX does not confirm by going above 25 on this leg. You see how it confirmed here and confirmed back here, and then we go to a new low. We should be on the lookout for a reversal when that happens. So down here, you should have been thinking, I know we're in a downtrend, but we should be thinking reversal if we can show any signs of strength. That might be what could take place here, but you have to be on guard at the 18-week. Is it going to get through there? Maybe if it can get through 7.5, then we can go up and test up this area around 9 or 10, something like that. So I don't know. We're getting close to a point where you could start to look for some kind of a reversion trade on the weekly, but it's still a little early. But the thought process is right if you're thinking this. I think we're getting really overdone on the downside. Now, XBI, so if you look at the way this played out, it tried to get through the 200-day here with it was still declining, and it failed. And it was still below the 18-month here. And then it turned around and tried to get through it again, and it hit the 18-month line. Okay, The thing is that MACD really hadn't turned up yet. It was trying to right here, and we didn't have any sign of real improvement on a momentum basis. Now we're turning up again. MACD's trying to get going, but we don't really have momentum yet. So I think what I'd like to see here is this move up a little bit more and test these highs and then hold the moving averages and then turn up. Then we'd have some sign of maybe an early emerging trend developing. It's just a little too early for me. I do respect what's going on here. This looks like a low ADX kind of base forming, but I just think it's a little early. I want a little bit more confirmation right now. Okay, so I had a question on WSO, a stock that I kind of highlighted this week because it's breaking out of this big base. So for my subscribers, I mean. So we've got good momentum here and we're starting to pull back. So the question is, you know, because this 18 is starting to roll over, do we have to wait for this to work its way back down, for these lines to come together, or look for some kind of opposing trend? I think that's possible. The other thing you can do, because this is coming out of a really nice base and it has strong momentum, is see if this uphooks, if this forms a higher pivot low right at the breakout low, it comes down a little bit more, maybe uphooks here and forms a higher pivot low. You could trade it off the weekly because it's coming out of this base on the monthly. You could trade it as a monthly weekly that way if you can get the higher pivot low. I always like to see the smaller time frame to confirm that. So it would be really nice if that forms a sideways pattern. We get a zero line reversal. But it is another option if you want to get in. You'd be taking more, you would give it more room because you're doing it off the weekly that way. If you wait for the daily, you can use daily risk. Okay, let's look at ATOM. So this is the first cross of the 200-day or the 40-week. You see that? And look at what you're doing. You're hitting the 18-month. So the guys that like the 200-day, I used the 200-day for a long time. I learned this. The first cross of a declining 200-day is usually too early, and you need a little bit more time. What I figured out was that it was really just hitting the 18-month in a lot of cases, and it needed to come down and pause and cup around a little bit. So I really like the trade here. If I want to trade this, maybe, but I got to recognize that this is probably not going to carry too far before pulling back and consolidating a little bit more because we're dealing with resistance on the higher time frame. So not a bad trade, but once we start to look at it from a bigger picture standpoint, I think we have to think we got a little bit more, take a little bit more time. Momentum is improving on this time frame. So lots of good things going on here. I just think it's a little early. Now look at PLTR. As a contrast. Now, this crossed the 200 here for the first time and then backed off. You see what I'm talking about? The first time you cross a declining 200, it's a little too early. You come back and turn around. Now, here's the difference with this. Look at what MACD is doing. Look at what the ADX is doing. This is in a much stronger position than something like ATOM from a momentum standpoint, I think. So getting through this 18-month is not that bad. The other thing that I would point out, we don't have that much history here. We don't even have a 40. So I discount the moving averages when I don't have as much history on this time frame. They're not as important. This has never been tested before. I'm going to be more focused on the weekly chart and weekly resistance. So I've got resistance here, but I think if this is going to get going, I think we're going to head up towards this 14 target. This next resistance zone would be the target that I'd be expecting as we're trying to break out here with good momentum and good volume. So could be a nice little intermediate term trading move developing. Really nice action on the daily. Look at the higher pivot low that formed. Okay, let's look at Visa. Visa is an interesting situation because it's holding up pretty well. We've got a pretty good look on the monthly. We've got a pretty good look on the weekly. We're in an uptrend here. We're actually qualifying this as an uptrend on the monthly now because these lines are rising again. We're in transition here, but notice how we're not turning it into a downtrend, and we've got a very soft landing kind of developing here with low ADX. So I really want this to break out. I want to see I'd love to see a big green bar here. You could look at that on the hourly and get a big green bar to kind of kick this thing off. I'd like to see volume behind it. I don't think this is going to do a sneak attack. I don't think we're going to break out in a sneaky way. I think if this is going to break out, and I think the market's the same way, we're going to have a big monster bar here to really get going. If the S&P is going to get through 4,200, I don't think it's going to sneak through. I think it's going to do it in a very violent, strong way. Look at MBLY. So this is my whole reasoning why I very much avoid earnings. Okay, if we have earnings coming, which was here, this is a great setup. It was forming this higher low. We had pulled back here. Really good look to it. But what I tell my subscribers, if you've got earnings coming, you got to be really, really careful. I tend not to do it. Some guys like to do options so that they know that they're only going to lose what they put in the option. But as far as I'm concerned, I usually just avoid. I really love this. I was like, man, I really love to do this right here at 45, but I'm not going to do it because I know I got earnings in a couple days, and no one knows what's going to happen when earnings come. So that's the real problem. Now we've spiked down and we're actually testing this area. I mean, I would not be surprised if we've seen the lows and there's probably some support in the mid 30s, but it's going to take a little bit more time now. Okay, let's look at a gold stock. So really strong move here. And we tried to break out. You see how we tried to break out from an overbought condition? You see how stretched this was? You see how stretched this was? I hate that. I mean, I'm not going to buy a breakout when it was stretched and up several weeks in a row. So now what we need is for this to kind of prove itself and maybe cut back around. We're starting into a transitional phase on this time frame. Can it turn into go from a transition without turning into a downtrend? If we go into a downtrend, then this is going to take a lot more time. If this just goes transition and then turns back up, we can get long playing off the weekly chart. Okay, look at Fiserve. Fiserve, so I think this is interesting. You see what's going on the monthly chart, but let's look at the 3-month chart. The quarterly chart. You see how this came down to, look at how this is a strong uptrend in place, really strong uptrend, came down to the 18-month area, still rising, and now is moving back up. So if we go and look at the monthly chart, it's actually gone from a transition without turning into a downtrend and now is emerging again. It's a little early. I mean, I'd love to see this pull back or pause here and have these cup around a little bit more. But I think the bigger picture on this is really, really intriguing. Thanks for joining me. My contact information is listed. If you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.